My name is Laura Duchessi, and I'm President and CEO of the Scranton Area Community Foundation. We're grateful to be able to host these listening sessions, the second day of these sessions with the City of Scranton and Mayor Cognetti's administration. As you're aware, the city has initiated an economic strategic plan. This economic development plan was created to guide the city in focusing on various strategic areas over the next 10 years. And these sessions that are being held today and that have been held yesterday are going to be focusing on 6 of these strategic areas as well as an additional area. And the 6 strategic areas are industry growth, diverse talent, community pride, affordable and quality housing, infrastructure, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've added a 7th area of emergency services simply because we're all so well aware with our nonprofit partners and our civic leaders that our communities are going to be facing a serious crisis within emergency services, probably starting into the new year, based on a variety of funding and other challenges. So we wanted to make sure we highlighted this issue as well, because these convenings with nonprofit executives, with civic leaders, with leaders from organizations across the county, pretty much, is based on not just talking about what is needed. And we heard that loud and clear yesterday. Our partners, the nonprofits in our community, they know what needs to happen. There's a lot of understanding of what's out there and what needs to happen. But the real draw that we heard yesterday, and I'm assuming we're probably going to hear today, along with some other new concepts that we need to hear, is that it's time to come to the table and to really start to create action around targeted solutions. And so along with the city, that is why the Scranton Area Community Foundation is hosting this convening, so that this could be the first step in a series of action steps to move aspects of these forward. So today we're going to hear from a variety of professionals whose work covers these focus areas. And these presenters are going to highlight the current needs, the current barriers, challenges, and areas of opportunities within these spaces. And I'm convinced that equipped with this information and the drive to move towards next steps and the passion that we hear in all of our community leaders, we will effectively come together and seek solutions and apply resources, investments, and advocacy to make this change happen. So we know it's a very, very busy time of the year, and we're grateful that you took the time to share it with us for these conversations. And people will be coming in, they'll be dropping in and out throughout the morning, as it was yesterday. But these sessions are being recorded on ECTV, and they'll be available online so that everyone can make sure that they tune in, whether they can be here or not, because it's such important information and so timely information that we're hearing. So again, thank you for all you do, and we look forward to this very important conversation.
Thanks, Laura. My name is Vivian Williams. I'm the Community Initiatives Manager at the Foundation. And just some housekeeping things, if you would. Frank Caputo over here, if you are checking in to speak, just make sure you let him know you're here. Running late, we could always move around the pieces. Dana Hunter, sitting right here, will be keeping time, so she'll be giving you the warning. It's about 6 minutes to speak with 4 minutes of question and answer from our lovely table here of Foundation and City staff. If anybody in the audience at any time has a question, feel free to come to the mic. We ask that you make sure you speak into the mic because they are recorded, and we have big plans for them after, so we want to make sure everybody is heard. And if you do need to have a conversation, we understand there's things that come to your mind that you want to talk to our partners here. We just ask that you move out to the lobby, again, because the ECT is recording, and we want to make sure we have the best quality of recording. And with that, I would like to introduce Sister Marianne from the St. Joseph Center.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm Sister Mary Alice Jacquinot from St. Joseph Center in Scranton, and I think everyone is familiar with our services, but I'm just going to highlight them very quickly. We've been in the Scranton community since 1888, and we began as an orphanage and primarily providing care for children. As those services, the needs for them expanded, we expanded, and as they changed, we changed. And so really since the 1950s, St. Joseph Center has been known for its services for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and especially those in the severe and profound range and those who are medically complex. And our services are as varied as the people we support. So it includes community-based services that might just be a point of contact for as little as 1 hour a week, or it might be 24-hour residential services. And because of our historic programs, we do still have services for the population we originally served that we call our maternity and family services. So it includes a large baby and children's pantry and 2 residential programs for women experiencing homelessness while pregnant or parenting an infant child. So when I speak about the challenges our organization faces or the challenges and obstacles our clientele might be facing, I'm really thinking primarily about the people who we serve in our residential and community-based programs, but I also include our staff, because if we didn't have the wonderful staff that we have, we couldn't provide those services. And that's true for all of the nonprofits in the room. But so I'm really always focusing on both populations. Our strategic plan for the past several years, even though we refresh it all the time, has really invited us to look at workforce. Who are we hiring? Who are we retaining? Who are we missing and coming into our wonderful organization? So since 2019, we've really had a focus on wages, and we've been able to improve wages. That helped us tremendously at the onset of the pandemic, but since then we sort of have lost ground a little bit in the number of staff that we have. We currently have 500. Our organization requires us to have 650 to meet all of the services that we have. So we can't close programs because it's someone's home for the largest majority of our services. And so we're relying on a lot of overtime and extra shifts and agency personnel. And that costs our organization a tremendous amount. So we are working with a lot of shortages. As I said, we've invested in our workforce through increased wages, training opportunities, and various recruitment concerns and strategies, and we'll continue to do that. The other side of our strategic plan, of course, is looking at services, but that's a little bit on hold. The expansion of services is challenged because of the workforce issues. So when I talk about industry growth or consider that, I'm really looking at what are new opportunities to recruit staff maybe who've never considered a career as a direct support professional. We're looking for people willing to be trained, to open their hearts, to be committed to support the people that we have the privilege of knowing. I do think one strategy might be the earlier introduction to work, looking at the high school population. For most of our staff, the prerequisite for work is a high school diploma, and then we educate and train them. So we're really looking for those who are career explorers, who might not be ready for college, who might never be ready for college, and still want a meaningful career supporting other people. So that would be one strategy. I mentioned our 2 residential program for women experiencing homelessness while pregnant or with an infant child. And so I am echoing what others have said here already, in that our community needs additional housing solutions. That would be for the population families, and also for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities who can live independently but do need some supports. And what I also hear from our staff very often is the need for increased transportation solutions within our community, so people who want to get to work can get to work with a little more ease, and also childcare and that need. St. Joseph Center is exploring the possibility of opening a small childcare program, But that circles us back to the workforce issue, and so we're being very strategic and cautious about moving forward there, but it is something that we would like to do. We do have a daycare program for medically fragile children. It reached its capacity of 60 in the last year, and we are looking at a second site that likely won't be in Scranton. It might be just on the periphery of Lackawanna County toward Wayne County. So that's something that we would like to do as well. I'm going to pause there and ask if anyone has questions for me. Thank you.
Good morning. So with the shortage of 150 and the overtime, how much turnover are you seeing in the field? Because I'm very familiar with the programs and the individuals you serve, and I know that it can be very intense, high compassion fatigue, things like that.
Sure.
So what kind of turnover are you seeing in that as well?
Sure. Depending on the program, we're seeing about 30%, which is a very difficult number because the level of care is very intimate. So, just like I often will say, I don't want anyone learning to brush the teeth of another person on me. And so as staff turns over, that's how many different people are helping with that level of personal care. So the people we support very often are total care. So the relationship is very intense. There's always been a high level of turnover because of compassion fatigue, but it's made worse by the shortages because with those shortages, we are asking people to work 3 to 4 extra shifts per pay period. And so work-life balance, there's a tough decision for people to make. And then the whole phenomenon of benefits cliff, because just yesterday I learned of someone who previously was eligible for certain support from a government program that she's no longer eligible for. So she's got to weigh, do I continue to work overtime and increase my wages, but at what price? The price of less family time and the price of losing some other community-based benefits. Thanks for the question.
So I have a question in regards to, you obviously have second and third shift employees, and I know you're developing partnership with Along the Way, which is kudos to you. How do you see the barriers for getting those second and third shift employees? Is it transportation? What are the barriers to securing that kind of staff?
There's always been barriers to second and third shift because it's obviously opposite typical family life, school life. So that's always been a case. So some of the things would be, looking at the extension of a child care program into that shift. I understand there's at least one provider of overnight child care, and it's difficult to try and schedule for that. And you have to make sure the child development needs are also being met. We do have an incentive per shift, and so there are people sometimes who prefer that. Our second shift often tends to be the youngest people in their 20s. And then we're very fortunate at St. Joseph Center. We have a number of sisters, religious sisters from Africa, and they like to work second shift. They love that, the activity of that shift, including assisting people as they go to bed for the night. So we've been fortunate. So then immigration is also another thing that we're paying a lot of attention to, and those needs are important. And the sense of a welcoming community, as Scranton broadly, is important to us also.
Sister, in your efforts to increase wages and work on benefits and further training of your employees, do you have a sense of what has been the most productive, what has given you the best results in retaining?
You may not be surprised. It's actually the integration of all three. So wages alone doesn't make the work more meaningful or satisfying. So it's really looking at helping the staff person to also grow their skills and knowledge base so they feel competent in the work. We know people who've walked away from higher paying jobs because they didn't have a sense of purpose or a sense of competence. So we really try and work at all. And then, of course, creating the work environment that's strong in communication, teamwork, and supervision. Those are the elements that we really focus on. So it's the integration. Wages is key. It's how people live their lives and pay their bills and take care of their families. So I'll never minimize that, but the other components are equally important. Great. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Sister, very much. Next up, we have Jen Aguilaro from Aguiloro. I'm sorry if I pronounced it. From Children's Advocacy Center.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to be here to take some of this time to talk about the Children's Advocacy Center. For those of you that don't know, the Children's Advocacy Center is a nonprofit child abuse intervention center. We provide forensic medical exams, forensic interviews, and coordinate a multidisciplinary team approach to child abuse in Northeast PA. We are located in Scranton, but we provide services to 6 surrounding counties. So one of the things, I'm going to talk about barriers right now because one of the things that we're seeing, and I'm sure everybody else is talking about, is stability issues. So housing, finances, jobs, all of those things can lead to, stress and, then abusive situations. So, we're really looking at how can we provide services to people in a multitude of different ways. How can we get kids to our center? How can we get community awareness up about the issues of child abuse, especially in our own community? The other barrier that we still face is stereotypes in asking for help, stereotypes in abuse itself. So it's a very difficult topic and nobody wants to admit that it's happening or to the extent that it's happening. So we're finding that kids are oftentimes going without services and without recognition because of those stereotypes. And then on the other side of that, asking for help, there are lots of stereotypes about how interventions are going to go. I'm going to lose my children. I'm going to lose my house, like all of those kinds of things. So I think we need to do better to make those connections available for people, make those services not so scary, for lack of a better word, so that people are able to reach out and say, I am struggling, I do need help, and we can be there to support them. And then, transportation needs are across the board probably with everyone. There are waiting lists and waiting lists and waiting lists at every mental health facility in the area to see kids, adults. The pandemic definitely did not help that situation at all. It exacerbated it. So to be able to get families up to have therapy services, to get families to come up to receive the services that we could provide is very difficult, as well as taking the time from work to make these appointments. So that's a huge, huge barrier to, what we're seeing is that a lot of people are working, salary jobs, I'm sorry, not salary jobs, hourly wage jobs. And, turnover is huge, and having to take maybe 1, 2, 3 appointments because something has happened to your child oftentimes can lead to, I'm going to lose my job if I take any more time. We know kids that have been abused often have behavioral issues as well. They go hand in hand. So oftentimes the parents are being called to the school for behavioral issues, so they're missing time from work for that also. What is something that maybe we see as a benefit, if there would be something that we could do regarding social media or apps on your phone that would maybe tell you about services in our local community. Everyone has a cell phone. Everyone, and people don't leave their homes without them. So if there was a system that we could let them know what different organizations in our community do, Oftentimes we get phone calls from people saying, I need help, and if you Google, you could go down a rabbit hole that could take you hours, and you really aren't getting the information that you need. It's not clear as to who to talk to or where to go, so that would be really helpful. We also think maybe educational workshops going out to people. We've often talked about PTA meetings and things like that, where we can get an audience so that we can have folks in these organizations come out and talk about their services, talk about how they can engage with folks in our community. But we have to go into their neighborhoods. We have to go into their places of worship. We have to go into places where people are gathering, because again, transportation is difficult. Childcare is huge. I'm sure everyone up here is probably going to mention childcare at some point, because again, people have jobs, people are trying to take care of their kids. Oftentimes, sometimes that second and third shift is the only one available, and then what do they do with their kids? And I think educating local businesses and organizations also, as in terms of the extent of services a child or a family might need if there are situations of abuse in the home. So it's not just, one trip to the Children's Advocacy Center, we do the interview, we do the medical exam, and then they're on their way. It's ongoing services for quite some time to really help that family heal. So I'm gonna stop there, and if there's any questions.
Transportation, as you would expect, has come up so frequently, and it's been a challenge for years, and it continues to be. But it's definitely an area that, we seek to continue to find solutions for. I'm curious how you handle some of the transportation challenges that you face. I know you said modifying location for things, but I'm wondering if there's also any other way.
Right. Thank you for that question. Luckily, we have a great partnership with the Office of Youth and Family Services. So if they are involved with the cases that we see, they can provide transportation. But I'm sure if they were here, they would also say, that's in limited supply, and, financially hiring people to be able to do that and then continue that service. We have put in some telehealth, mental health services, so we're able to reach people if they have that technology and the electronics in their home to be able to have those types of things. So we're really trying to reach out to more people to be able to provide more services. But hopefully sometimes we get bus passes donated, or if we get gift cards, or if we can solicit donations, we will put that into funds for people to get gas cards or things like that to come to the treatment.
Can you share a little bit about how housing insecurity, food insecurity, job insecurity is kind of a gateway to trauma, and that abuse that can occur from that, and kind of how that connects as well, and the impact it has on a lot of your clients?
Sure, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that we see is that fear of asking for help. And so if you are limited in your resources, asking for help means someone's going to come and take my kids, or someone's going to come and take me out of my home, or I'm just not providing enough. And so the stress of that then leads to anger and frustration, which could lead to physical abuse. We see a lot of emotional abuse, and even with kids who are struggling with food insecurities and things like that when they go to school, people notice, right? Kids notice other kids if they have dirty clothes or if they're missing school a lot, those types of things. And oftentimes our systems are punitive, really. And so that's one of the things that we need to sort of change people's mindsets. If a kid is missing school a lot, it's not just because they don't want to be there, or they're bad kids, or they have ADHD so they can't sit still or they can't pay attention. We need to really look at what's happening in the home, and then providing some kind of support or services to help that situation, rather than the punitive of you'll lose your job, or we'll kick your kid out of school, or things like that. So yeah, I mean, stress is huge. I'm sure even with everyone in this room, we all have stressors, and if they're not positive ways to cope with those stressors, then it can come out as anger and abusive situations.
One of the things that we're hearing a lot, in addition to the general workforce shortage, the workforce shortage in healthcare is particularly the workforce shortage around licensed clinical social workers and the social workers. I was just wondering if you could, from a knowledgeable perspective that you have, speak to that a little bit.
Yes, I think for us personally, it's been difficult finding those licensed social workers because there's just not a lot of people that stay in this area that want to do that kind of work. So that's the first barrier that we find. The second barrier is, and it's systemic, and I don't have any answers for this, but credentialing therapists is really a difficult challenge. There's a lot of work that the therapists have to go through. There's a lot of hoops that insurances want you to go through. And so that process can take 6, 8, 12 months. And so, they're not able to see kids until that credentialing process starts. So what we've done in our organization is we've looked for grant funding to be able to, have those people that have the degree be able to come in, see our kids, and luckily those grant funds are helping support those services that we could provide until we can get them credentialed. But that's a really big hurdle that we have to overcome.
I was hoping you could touch on COVID and how, what you're seeing post-COVID learning loss. I'm sure some that were still in high school then now have children of their own, and how that affects you, or what your greatest takeaway from post-COVID is now.
Thank you. Luckily, we were able to stay open the entire time. In the beginning, it was just for emergency services, but we're not able to close and say to kids, "Sorry, you can't be abused today. There's a pandemic going on." So we definitely saw a decrease in the numbers of cases that were reported of abuse. Unfortunately, for these kids, oftentimes, their abuse happens at home. And so when they're not at school, when they weren't in community organizations, Boys and Girls Club, things like that, abuse was not getting recognized. It wasn't getting reported. And so that has changed a bit since kids are back at school and kids are back in the community with other people. Our services really didn't change, but I think just that shutting down of the world, and really everybody kind of went inward, and we saw a lot that we weren't able to help. And so we're trying to get the education back out there to say, listen, you really need to pay attention to these kids, and you need to pay attention to their behaviors and ask questions about how things are happening at home and how you're doing. Those are really important things that we need to keep asking. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I don't believe our next speaker is here yet. So I do see that Joseph Hollander from Scranton Primary Healthcare is here. So if he's okay with that, we'll jump to Joe next. So thanks so much.
Good morning, everyone. I would first like to take this opportunity to thank Scranton Area Foundation for the invitation to participate this morning. I'd like to begin this morning by telling you a little bit about Scranton Primary Healthcare Center. We are the only federally qualified healthcare center in Lackawanna County. As an FQHC, we provide primary medical, dental, and behavioral health care to all, regardless of their ability to pay. All of our providers and staff are paid employees in the health center. We are not a volunteer or free clinic. As a community health center, we offer pediatrics, family and internal medicine, women's health, gynecology, prenatal and postpartum services, infectious disease care, general dentistry, and behavioral health. In addition, we have 2 full-time employees who assist people in the community navigate the health insurance marketplace. Last year alone, we provided care to over 16,000 patients, which resulted in slightly over 49,000 visits to our health centers. We're proud to say last week we celebrated our 44th anniversary of providing services to the community. Our main office is located at 959 Wyoming Avenue here in Scranton. We also have a satellite office on Alder Street in South Scranton, and we also provide student health services for Lackawanna College. Our employees are almost as diverse as our patients, speaking a variety of languages including English, Spanish, Portuguese, Danish, Russian, German, Hindi, Gujarati, Urdu, Nepali, Punjabi, and American Sign Language. We have translation services that are available to assist our patients for any languages we do not speak internally. I was asked this morning to speak on implementation and defining success and also industry growth. I've always believed that actions speak louder than words. In the case of Scranton Primary Healthcare, we are defining success by citing how much we have grown in the last 9 years to meet the needs of the community. While there have been various initiatives in the last several years to try and make healthcare affordable to the public at large, with things like the Affordable Care Act, better known as Obamacare, the need for our services continue to grow. Since 2014, we have almost doubled in size in terms of patients served and the number of patient encounters. At the present time, 14% of our patients have no insurance at all. This does not include the people who have purchased health insurance through the health insurance marketplace and simply cannot afford to use it because of high deductibles ranging from $5,000 to $7,000 and high co-pays ranging anywhere from $50 to $75 simply to see a family care doctor. In addition to our growth, we have added services based on community need. We have expanded our dental clinic to 3 full-time dentists and intend to add more dentists as soon as we complete our expansion and have the space for them to work. We have added behavioral health care and also infectious disease care in responses to the needs of the community and our patients. I humbly suggest our efforts in responding to the pandemic are another example of implementing and defining success. Scranton Primary Healthcare worked very hard from the beginning to ensure we did our part to assist the community. We invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in our facilities by installing HEPA filtration and UVC filtration systems, as well as purchasing secondary electronic filtering systems for every exam room, waiting room, and common area throughout the buildings. We remained open throughout the pandemic, never closing, not even for one single day. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were utilizing national labs to get test results for patients, some of whom remained home until they had, and quarantined until they were able to get their results. There were times we actually called patients with the results and told them the good news was that they had tested negative. The bad news was they had wasted 2 weeks of their lives quarantining, waiting for the results. As a result, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to procure test equipment to be able to supply results in 45 minutes. As soon as the vaccine became available, we requested and received special permission from the Pennsylvania Department of Health to be able to vaccinate police, fire, along with EMS workers. We also received special permissions to vaccinate and go into senior housing facilities ahead of the scheduled phases in an effort to vaccinate the elderly. Our biggest challenges today are very similar to other healthcare and other social service organizations. Helping our staff obtain child care, replacing staff when they're off of work due to illness or illness of their children, filling our vacant positions, and being able to provide a livable wage for our employees. Needless to say, transportation remains a huge challenge, not only in getting patients to our appointments, but getting patients to be able to go and obtain lab work and specialist appointments. With that being said, I'm available for any questions or comments.
I think there's so many things that you've highlighted that Scranton Primary Health did so well throughout the pandemic. I'm struck by the amount of individuals, patients served by the clinic. It's significant, and I'm curious how you were able to structure the capacity to be able to handle that and continue to handle it, as I'm sure the population grows.
Well, Laura, as you know, you've toured our facility, and there's not a nook or cranny or empty broom closet that isn't being utilized in some form or another. We've opened satellite offices. We continue to look for locations throughout the area. And also, as you know, we're raising funds at the present time to build out an additional 5,000 square feet to accommodate these services. The best answer I can give you truly is that we have an exemplary staff who are truly rock stars, who have risen to the occasion and truly believe in our mission and serve the patients and help them become healthier people in the community.
Hi, Joe. You've been a great partner in the Building Confident Smiles program we have at the foundation. What are some of the ancillary or barriers that your staff is finding clients still are unable to make their appointments or not?
It's really hard to say, but unfortunately, I believe a lot of the patients that we serve don't truly understand and value preventive health care, whether it's dentistry, whether it's healthcare, whether it's healthy diets. Part of it is availability, but the other part is truly understanding the benefits, because many of them have grown up in cultures where either it's not valued or it's simply not available, and therefore they're not familiar with it. Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Tom Menorah. I think you guys did an awesome job, by the way, especially during the pandemic. But I wondered, were you able to take advantage of telehealth at all during the pandemic? And if not, what were the barriers that impeded you?
So thank you for that question. So yes, very early on in the pandemic, April and May of 2020, we were probably 40 to 45% telehealth, the balance in-person visits, and we utilized it. We continue to utilize it today. A larger percentage of it is in our behavioral health department, but we found that very many of our patients preferred to be seen in person and felt that they were safe coming to our facilities, and therefore we were seeing them in person. I don't think an in-person visit, especially in primary medical care and especially in dental care, can be replaced by telehealth visits. They're a good supplement and they're a good follow-up in many cases, but having that in-person, hands-on makes a world of difference.
One of the things that we heard a lot yesterday and which you reiterated today is just the strong need for translation services amongst nonprofit organizations. I know in some situations this is clearly different because it's healthcare delivery, but I'm also curious with the amount of languages that you have to treat patients, the patients that have speak those languages. How do you handle that, and are there enough sufficient translation services?
Well, believe it or not, we have a number of different translation services, both video and telephone, that are available and we're able to manage. We have not found a language that we could not find services available for. I will tell you that while the staff speak a myriad of languages, as the community embraces refugees, which it always has, there are those languages that we simply don't speak. Probably the most recent being, as we've started to see a growing number of patients from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, they speak Swahili. I can tell you I have trouble with English, let alone speaking Swahili, and none of our staff do, but the translation services do work. They're not as ideal as speaking the language directly, but we make it work and we manage, and we're able to use those same translation services in our telehealth platforms.
Follow up to the telehealth question. I understand the value of seeing in person and appreciate that connection, but I'm also curious if a majority of your patients who declined telehealth, do you think that there were technology issues or challenges to obtaining the technology they would need in order to do telehealth?
Well, I appreciate the question. Contrary to a lot of providers who pushed for telehealth by means of video and phone, we were happy to accommodate people by phone only. So I don't believe it was as much a technology challenge as it was being able to speak to the provider in person and the provider being able to speak to the patient in person and being able to observe their mannerisms, et cetera. Thank you.
Thanks for everything, Joe. Just a quick question about the workforce aspect. You know, we've heard a lot about the challenges of getting competent employees, and I imagine with healthcare field it's probably even exacerbated considering what the needs are, even for organizations that can pay, you know, huge amounts, you know, different corporations. So I'm wondering if there's things that you think that the foundation, the city, or other people with, you know, philanthropic drive can help with as far as the healthcare workforce.
Thanks, Maggie. I wish I had an answer to that question. I don't know what the answer is because the biggest single challenge we're facing is so many people wanting to work from home. The pandemic created this world where everybody wants to do work from home, whether it's provider level on down. When we interview people, very often they're asking either how many hours, how many days a week they can work from home. And, you know, for us, healthcare delivery is in person, and it doesn't lend itself as much to at home. But there are those jobs out there, and they're stealing away valuable and competent employees. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Joe. Appreciate that and fielding all of our questions. Next up, we have Leslie Collins with Scranton Tomorrow.
Good morning. I'm Leslie Collins. I'm the president and CEO of Scranton Tomorrow. I'd like to thank Scranton Area Community Foundation for allowing all of these great nonprofits to come today and really share our needs and the needs of our client base. So thank you for that. Scranton Tomorrow is a 501c3 nonprofit. We are community and economic development driven, and our main focus is the downtown Scranton Business District. As some of you may know, Scranton Tomorrow was created in 1992, and we were born out of community engagement sessions similar to this at the Radisson Hotel in the early 90s. And that was led by Jean Bovard from the Scranton Area Foundation. So Scranton Tomorrow was actually created and born out of the Scranton Area Foundation. So it's extra special for us to be able to be here today. Throughout our history, and I should mention that we are celebrating our 30th anniversary this year, so it's a big year for Scranton Tomorrow. It's crazy for me to even say these words, but I am approaching in April my 17th year with Scranton Tomorrow. So for me personally, it has just been such a wonderful experience. It's been a growing experience, and I have just learned to work within our community and really have met such incredible fellow nonprofit leaders and organizations and dealing with the community on a day-to-day basis. Standing up here, honestly, when I look at and I looked at the list of all of the presenters, it's one of those things where I say, wow, Scranton Tomorrow is not the same as the majority of the nonprofits that are presenting today. There's so many nonprofits that are really dealing with underserved populations and critical issues within our region. And so I applaud all of you. I stand up here myself saying, there is a difference with Scranton Tomorrow because we are economic and community development. Yet what we provide to our community is truly vital, and it's vital in a different way. What we feel as a nonprofit in the community and economic development sector is that and I should say we are now focused on the downtown business district. In our beginning, we were community-wide and we had a significant staff. As our staff diminished and funding from state and federal sources started to diminish, we became more focused on the downtown business district and became a Pennsylvania state accredited and designated Main Street organization. So we continue to follow this structure and formula of the state for revitalization for a downtown business core. But when you look at what programming Scranton Tomorrow provides and the services we provide not only to the downtown, but truly to our region and our community, our Scranton community as a whole, what you see is the strength of your urban district is critical to the strength, the sustainability, and really the advancement of your adjacent neighborhoods. So when you look at the downtown district and the services that we provide, we're dealing with business owners, primarily small business owners, and their customer base and tourism. And when you look at that sector, the impact that economic development has is what sustains our neighborhoods. They're individuals that live within our neighborhoods that own small businesses within our district. They are employing individuals, whether they are higher paid wages or a low minimum wage. They are employing the individuals within our own community. Every dollar that is spent within the downtown district and our neighborhood community districts goes back into our local community versus going to big box stores and big box areas and traveling out of town to get services that you actually can get right within the city of Scranton. So I think that's important to note that we are very different from many of you that are here today in this room that provide amazing services, yet we do provide very valuable services to our community. Let me tell you a little bit about those services and some of our struggles. As I said, Scranton Tomorrow had a significant staff back in the day. We were at one point where it was just solely me for a number of years. Right before COVID, we started to increase our staff as we moved from a Main Street district formula into what's called a business improvement district formula, which is continuing to provide services as you were a Main Street, yet your community from property owners would fund the organization. And this is a multi-level, a multi-yeared process in order to get there. At this point in time, all of the services that we provide and have provided for the 17 years that I am at Scranton Tomorrow are free and open to the entire community. So everything that we provide, we do not charge a membership fee, we do not charge a participation fee. Anyone that would like to participate in any of our programming is eligible, which is quite different from many other economic and community development organizations. So we find that to be one of our greatest gifts to our community, yet it is one of our greatest struggles as a nonprofit organization. It eliminates an entire tier of operating dollars for us to support ourselves. So the majority of the dollars that come into Scranton Tomorrow are spent on programming. At this point in time, we have 2 full-time staff individuals, which includes myself, and we have 1 part-time project leader and 1 part-time outdoor ambassador doing outdoor work for us. As part of the Main Street formula and Business Improvement District formula, we provide a certain set of programming. They fall under 4 different categories. One is Safe, Clean, and Green. Our Safe, Clean, and Green is keeping exactly that, our downtown, our business community, which is 30 blocks, safe, clean, and green. So we have built some very strong partnerships with the city of Scranton. We work with numerous departments there, the police department on a daily basis, making sure that we have curb appeal and things are clean and we are not graffiti written, and that individuals coming to our downtown, working in our downtown, our neighbors who are walking into our down have appropriate lighting, feel safe, and have a beautiful environment to go through. We also have a program that actually started in the early days of Scranton Tomorrow that we stopped for about a decade. We re-kick-started that during COVID, and that is City Pride. Scranton Area Foundation is a supporter of our City Pride program, and we thank you for that. Just to give you a few stats on that, when we brought that back, we knew we could not bring it back in its original capacity, which was City Pride. So we reached out to fellow nonprofits, NeighborWorks, mainly, and asked them, would they like to participate with us? They could help us support the neighborhoods. We could focus on the downtown as well. Last year, for our first year pulling together that partnership, we had 330 volunteers for a week's worth of programming throughout the entire city. In 2022, we had 640 volunteers, 9,000 volunteer hours. We, I believe, picked up 5,000 pounds of trash throughout the entire city. A partnership that grew out of COVID that is continuing for 2023, and we are bringing in other nonprofits to help support this endeavor, and we feel very confident that we will be into the thousands with our volunteerism. So thank you for your support of that program. It's important to mention that in Safe, Clean, and Green, we also engaged other nonprofits that we really was out of our wheelhouse. We are working now with the Scranton School for the Deaf. We are working with the Veterans Home on Mulberry Street. So we're bringing in all of these other nonprofits and other sectors to be much more diverse in our programming, much more equitable and much more inclusive. And that's something that really was for us a silver lining of COVID, when we looked at our community and asked what are the needs and how can Scranton Tomorrow help support those needs. We did change our programming, we increased our programming, and we became much more, like I said, inclusive in our programming, which we're very excited about, and continuing that for our future. So it was an opportunity for growth for us in our programming. We also created a mural arts program, which is free and open to the community. It's open air art, so that every sector of our region can enjoy artistic creativity and be part of that program. We provide marketing and promotions to all of our downtown businesses. We manage hundreds of businesses within the downtown sector during the pandemic, and we continue today to really look at what those critical needs are of our business community as well, not only our region as a whole. We have found that they, as like ourselves and probably all of us here, extremely understaffed, looking at opportunities to increase wage opportunities, incentives to bring staffing to their business, training for individuals to support their businesses. So those are all things that we're working with other organizations to help support our downtown businesses. I'll give you a quick example of how we've increased our marketing potential for the downtown district. Normally, we would do some social media, we would have marketing activities and promotional opportunities, once again, all free to the business community. We may, on a social media campaign, maybe have 1,000 reaches. And we thought, wow, 1,000 reaches, that's awesome. 1,000 reaches they didn't have yesterday. An example, we just did, we have a campaign going on for the holidays. We focused on a few small businesses, and within 24 hours, we had reached over 10,000 people. So our campaigns are much more developed. They're more thought out. They're more inclusive of the needs of the business community. I know I could talk all day. I know I'm getting the sign, you're done. But I just want to reiterate that really Scranton Tomorrow's needs are increasing our staff capacity to really become more inclusive and equitable throughout the district, and also to help provide the increased services that our struggling businesses are encountering. So it's really a staff capacity and an operational funding dilemma because we do everything for free right now. So once again, I thank you for your time, and I applaud all of the nonprofits that are on your list for presentations today. Thank you.
Thank you for that very comprehensive overview. And, I think you illustrated a very important point in that industry growth is one of the key components of why we are here today. One of the things that I would ask, you laid out all of the themes and the programs and all of your focus areas, and you mentioned staff capacity, which we hear frequently. We know that. The others is the services that your clients, the businesses, need. What are you seeing in terms of how you're focusing on the downtown as it shifts, post-COVID, what some of these services are that you're called upon to do more frequently?
Sure. So we actually have served as an intermediary in a number of situations where a business may have needs they're not sure, they're struggling, they're this close to closing, and we're dealing with a number of businesses that are in financial ruin right now. And so we're trying to bring supportive services to them. So we are an intermediary. We're also a convener. So we bring individuals and other assets within our region that can come to the table and help support them. So if we can't provide funding to them, we know the sources that can sit down and help them. So we will connect them to the SBDC, to the City of Scranton, to Lackawanna County, and to numerous other organizations that can help support their needs. We're also working with a new sector, which is a lot of growth within the downtown. So it's individuals that were working in other capacities that may have lost their jobs or decided that after COVID they did not want to return to those jobs. So now they're looking to become entrepreneurs, and they're looking for who can help us, who can kind of pull the whole ball of wax together, a one-stop shop for them, and we have become that one-stop shop. So we are working with a number of individuals that are starting their own businesses, and we're connecting with them with, once again, organizations. So here's how you start a business plan. Here are the things you need to think about. Here are the resources we can bring to the table, and here's the follow-up. And we will walk with you hand in hand through the process and make sure that we can do our best for you to be successful. So those are some of the new challenges that we're encountering where we haven't seen that as long as I'm actually with the organization. And I think we've become a strong resource and a reliable resource. We've had limited turnover, so they know us, we know them. They feel comfortable discussing things that maybe they wouldn't be comfortable discussing with others, and we kind of hold some hands along the way.
Thank you.
Hi, Leslie. I'm curious more about your vision for formally organizing as a business improvement district, and if that would include levying a kind of service fee on businesses within the district, and kind of where you're at with that, and kind of where the organization's thinking is, and if there are any obstacles. Yeah.
Sure. So originally, City of Scranton, through City Council, approved legislation for Scranton Tomorrow to move forward as the designated economic development organization for downtown Scranton. And with that was a plan of work, a 3 to 5 year plan to become a business improvement district organization where property owners would help support all of the activities of Scranton Tomorrow. We are moving slowly toward that plan. Obviously, the pandemic was right in the beginning of that process, and we realized that some of that needed to be put on hold for us to address the immediate concerns and issues of the community. So it was once again one of those things we said, okay, we're going to have to put our own plan of work on hold right now, and we may have to recreate ourselves. And because if we continue to push forward with that model during that time frame, we weren't providing a service to anyone but ourselves. So we really realized that was not the way we wanted to go. We wanted to make sure that we put that on hold and we provide the services that are needed and immediate services, and keep in touch with what are the daily needs. So we're communicating every day to make sure that we're still addressing the needs of coming out of COVID. How do we transition into that now too? So we're still moving forward, hopefully, with the business improvement model, which yes, is a It is an assessment that is levied on property owners. There are various formulas that can be utilized. There is a very well laid out strategic plan through the state that you must abide by. We are not at that point at this point in time. It is community meetings. It is a lot of discussions with property owners. It's reviewing various formulas for that particular funding model. But right now, we're just slowly creeping toward that, but we see that out a number of years at this point. So it does cause us that interim funding of operations, concern.
Thank you. And if I could steal one quick other question too, for a lot of your services that are kind of opt-in for businesses, do you have do you have any challenges reaching kind of certain demographics of businesses or certain types of businesses that provide services? And I'm curious if there are businesses on the margins that we can all be doing a better job of connecting with, or kind of what your experience with that has been.
Yes, so that's actually a great question. Thank you for that. So as I mentioned about diversity, so we really struggle with diversity in the downtown. And so we have held a number of discussion groups. We've met with a number of other nonprofits. We've actually worked with the University of Scranton and their students in doing some research for us on this. What are those barriers of getting more diverse businesses into our downtown? And we always used to say, oh, downtown Scranton is so diverse, you can get anything you want. And that's true in one aspect, but when you look in the aspect of business owner diversity, we have a lot of work to do. And that is something we really do want to focus on. There are some barriers. There's language barriers, there's transportation barriers, and there's financial barriers to setting up a storefront in the downtown. So those are some of the things we actually have had communication with a number of the property owners, a number of developers, on how do we help bring in some more diverse businesses. Because you look at South Side is a great example of a diverse community in business development. And some of that we were questioning, why is it all in South Side? Why aren't some of those businesses trickling into the downtown? And like I said, it turns out to be a lot of that is where their core customer base also is located. And if there's transportation barriers, financial barriers, and language barriers, then why would they come into the downtown? So those are definitely things that we would like to move forward with. Yes.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so very much.
Thank you so very much, Leslie. Very insightful. I would like to welcome back up to the stage from a speaker from yesterday who has some additional insights she wants to provide about the social workers, and we appreciate her taking time to speak with us again today. Lori Chaffers from Outreach.
I just told Lori LeMaster, when you're naughty, you get invited back, I guess. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. I don't have as much prepared, but you did ask a question. I have two thoughts about the plan and then one of the questions that came up today. One of the questions you asked today is about the social workers and bringing social workers in. And I think that one of the challenges for nonprofits, for our behavioral and mental health providers, for even our county's provided services like OIFIS, and for ourselves, even at Outreach, is that these careers are not seen anymore as a way to make a living. We are often grant funded or funded through tax money in some of those programs that I listed, and those salaries just don't pay really well. And so we are looking. When I moved, I was at the county previously. When I moved from the county to Outreach, they graciously gave me a wonderful compensation package. But I am keenly aware that I have a better package than most of my employees. And so health benefits are included in that. Living wages are included in that. And so on the one hand, it's drawing people who feel that they can move come here and make a livable wage. You can move to other parts of the state and make $60,000, $70,000 as a social worker. Here you're making between 30 and 35. There's not really great reason to stay. One of our local universities, I won't call anyone by name, has a large department that has a wonderful group of students, and it's fairly large compared to others, but most of them don't stay in this area for that reason. And so that goes back to one of the challenges of, you have a very large population of people who are providing services to the most vulnerable in our community, and I think that includes our childcare and educators as well, who are not adequately compensated for doing that work, and then we're surprised when they're tired. And when they're burnt out. And so I think that, and when they're trying to make ends meet, or when they're qualifying for WIC themselves, or when they're qualifying for CHIP themselves, CHIP is a better program than I can offer in health benefits, quite frankly. And so I suggest to my employees that they're right around the cutoff, that they can go do that. Now, we're working hard at that. My board is committed. We've made several changes, and we're finally financially able to make some of those changes, and are committed to moving people forward. But healthcare is a major issue. I would love to see, when we're talking about solutions, I'd love to see some of the smaller nonprofits come together and have some sort of healthcare consortium, or some ability to have economies of scale, because we're just about to cross the 50 mark this year. And that will change things for us, but also I have Crohn's, and that's going to drive up our cost. I know that, right? So I think that that's one tangible way that you can support the smaller organizations who are struggling to find ways to attract quality employees. The other side of that is that the pipeline is not there. So I happen to be friends with someone who's doing a lot of recruiting for one of the schools of social work in the area, and who's hitting the pavement hard, but people aren't even considering social work or counseling as major because of those other factors that I just outlined. The second thing that I wanted to mention when Maggie and I were chatting over there is that one of the things outlined in the plan that we haven't talked a lot about is the wraparound for the public schools. Particularly in this instance, the city of Scranton. I would argue that one of the challenges that nonprofits face, but that also the school district is facing, is that all of us wear a lot of hats, right? There's not any one person in the school district who's dedicated to being the community liaison to bring in all of these services that we would love to provide to the school, because they have to wear so many hats and they're pulled in so many directions because of the various regulations that are put on them from the state or the federal government, that there's not, I know that in my attempts in the history of my time in the last 10 years here, it's asking to rob Peter to pay Paul, right? And so you're asking someone to step away from maybe the homeless and McKinney-Vento students to bring in a new program, but they're also dealing with the bus shortage. That's also the same person who's dealing with school safety and security, and they're wearing so many different hats that there's not any one or two people who are fully dedicated to being able to connect with all of these community partners who would love to come in, who would love to wrap around services. We'd love to bring our home visiting to all of these little kindergartners. It makes sense. It's good for their families and their younger siblings coming in. And I always say this to the schools. Our home visiting programs make sure that you have a good partner school. By the time that child enters your door, you have a parent who's a partner who's invested in education, understands why it's so important. But they don't always have the time to take a lunch break. One of the schools we were able to get into Scranton, the principal made sure there was coverage during a lunch break so that we could talk to all the kindergarten teachers, right? They can't all do that. And so I would argue that one of the commitments that we can make here as a community and a next step is to help the school district be able to provide people who are identified people. Oh, you want to get into the school district? This is the person you need to call, right? This is the way we need to do that, because I think that they're pulled in so many different directions administratively that they don't have time to come here. Even I talked with Maggie about coming today and yesterday. We had to divide and conquer because we're all wearing lots of hats too, right? But I think we're expecting them to do something that, like, well, why won't you take this free help we want to give you? Well, because I have to do all of these 70 other things that are mandated that I do by the state. And so I think that we have to work there. And I think that points to yesterday, I'll go back to, about being a good neighbor. Our schools are the opportunity for us to wrap kids tightly, to wrap families tightly, to meet them where they are. I'll talk about a program that I did in Camden again. we did a language program for our students and for their parents. And the idea behind that program was to empower the parents to have the right language and skills to be able to support their kids' education. So we had volunteers come in who would do ESL with the parents, but the ESL was really focused on how do we help your children with their homework? How do you advocate for your children in the school? So we were giving them skills to navigate the school system, while we also provided tutoring for the children. And it was kind of a both and. It was a phenomenal program. But so I think that, but again, that was because those schools that I was in that happened to be in the Catholic schools, we had a dedicated community engagement and family support team, right? We created that. We understood that we had to have all of our educators educating, and we had to dedicate people who wrapped families tightly. So I think that those are kind of the two things. Maggie, anything else? I didn't say anything that I was afraid was going to be quoted wrong today. That's good.
I'm going to ask a third thing, because we've talked about this a lot. Can you give an overview of the need for more understanding and education around trauma, specifically the pandemic trauma, and how it impacts all of these issues as a whole?
Yeah, I think so. I know there was a lot of trauma around. I need a tissue. I apologize for my terrible nose. I think that the pandemic just highlighted the problems we already have. I'm not saying that it didn't cause more trauma. I'm saying it exacerbated. I always talk about a rubber band. The rubber band had no slack. The rubber band was already pulled really tight, and the pandemic just made it snap. Thank you so much. I apologize. This is like week 3 of this. My apologies. So I do think, but we were talking about trauma-informed care before the pandemic. Little kids' brains, our brains, there's all the research. You know the research. You've heard of Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. You've read the books, right? I think that all of our kids, I said this yesterday, those basic needs, when housing isn't met, when food isn't met, when you aren't up to date on your vaccines and you're getting sick with childhood illnesses that had previously had been eradicated, right? Like those, this year, we're all can't get over this nonsense. RSV is literally taking the lives of our children in greater numbers, but all of that trauma, and that's trauma for our kids, right? That's trauma. We have a whole school right now who's dealing with the death of one of their kiddos. There's trauma there. Us having crisis response ready to go in and deal with that, but also dealing with that throughout the year always, right? Understanding what a trauma-informed classroom looks like. I was just talking with someone who said, oh, their kid was in a classroom and the son came home and said, like, oh, that kid has anger management issues. Well, that kid has trauma issues, right? That kid is just living out whatever they've learned to cope with. And so equipping teachers, equipping guidance counselors, administrators, equipping the front staff, like the receptionist, about trauma-informed care, right, is vitally important. Because when a kid walks in and the person in the front office is like, why are you late today? Not realizing that they had a domestic violence incident at their house last night doesn't set them up to have great success that day, right? So I think there's a whole initiative in the community about trauma-informed care, equipping all of us with the ability to meet a person where they are and to understand that the response we're seeing isn't maybe a child throwing a tantrum or someone, we talked about this, some communities are teaching their bank tellers, right? Because when they swipe their card and there's no money in their account and they have a meltdown in the middle of the bank teller needs to be equipped on how to handle that, right? Because that's about trauma. In Disney World, they are training their people when they're having panic attacks about rides, how to do grounding techniques with people in the lines at Disney World, right? If they're like, doesn't that blow your mind, right? So literally I had a friend, she told me she had a little meltdown on a ride and she was just having a panic attack and he got on the ground with her and did a grounding technique with her, right? I think that that's the kind of thing that we all need to take, we have to do, I don't know, we have to do that. But we've been talking about it for a long time. I think there's some initiatives happening that could use some financial support to help get those off the ground, but we have to give teachers space to do that, right? Like we can't be like, teach, and by the way, add this onto your curriculum. Like we have to equip them so that they're, maybe there's an emotional literacy course that goes into the school that gives the teacher an extra prep period in addition to the one they already have, right? Like maybe there's some solutions where we reduce the burden on our very tired teachers that also equips them to respond to our very tired children.
No, please. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hopefully, week 3 is the end of that for you.
I hope so too.
My name is Tim Wolf. I'm the Director of Human Resources for the school district. I've met you before. In my previous role, this isn't so much a question, but more of an extension to have a partnership again. When I was the principal at Whittier Elementary, I worked with your organization on a high level, constantly referred people to your program, attended a couple things. It's a tremendous, tremendous program for our families in our community. So I want to give that compliment to you.
Thank you.
A lot of great things coming out of there. Pandemic kind of shut everything down for a little while, but I'm here with Mr. DeLuca, who's our Director of Leadership and Accountability, and we do appreciate the 1,000 hats because we do wear 1,000 hats. But before you go, we want to make sure that we get your contact information again, rekindle that connection, possibly speak to our administrators, our principals, to kind of regain that connection, to help our parents, our families, our kids, and our staff.
Yep.
And you know, a lot of the things, I believe it was at PNC Field we met, and we talked a lot about connecting the dots, right? We have Scranton Area Foundation, we have outreach, we have the school district, we have CYS, we have all these programs, all these great things, and I think that there's a lot of availability in this area, and this is a good step forward, right? We're communicating, but making sure we're connecting those dots. So we want to make sure we do that before we leave today with you.
Yeah, that's great. I will give you my card before I slip out, which is soon, but yes. And I think that's
I'll
good.
stand
I
over
think
there by the door, so I get you.
great. I think that's the next, like, those are the kinds of action steps, like giving the school district the ability, the space to have us wrap around. That's what's in the plan, right? The plan says, let's wrap around tightly, but what's the how of that? How do we connect with the right people at the school to push in and equip and use all of it? Not just, I love outreach. Thank you. I love what we do. I think we set families up to be really successful in school. That's why I went there, because I understand how important that early childhood is. Also preschool. I'll just leave that there. It's a shame.
We'll leave it there.
We'll leave it there.
Over there.
But I think, you know, we want to grow healthy kids, right? And we want to do that together. There is no one at the school who's like, I don't really want to do well by my kids, right? But there are lots of people at school who say, I don't know how I could possibly. And if we don't give you capacity to do another thing, then we can't complain about how we can't get into the school. So
That's your team?
is that
Your team?
No, I don't have it. My team's not here. I just think, and you who are here today have the capacity to make that happen for the Scranton School District, and therefore for all of the nonprofits in the room who want to wrap tightly around them.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Tom.
I'll wait by the door.
Okay. I've got half an hour, but I'll give you my card when I get over there.
You know, one of the things I think it is about next connecting the dots and the implementation of all of these important themes, or at least most of these important themes. One of the things that we're hearing is, you know, you mentioned about benefits and, you know, living wage and compensation of employees in the nonprofit sector. And I think that we're hearing about, you know, opportunities for shared services, maintenance, translation, et cetera. But you mentioned a healthcare consortium. And I know, you know, when I came into this role about 10 years ago, I remember that there was such a consortium offered by one of the member organizations in the area, which I don't believe is still there. But I do think that it's something that so many nonprofits would benefit from. I'm not very well aware of if anything such as that is going on currently, or who would be the lead to take that on, you know?
I don't know either if it's happening, but I know that healthcare went up by 14% for us this year. We're going to hit, like I said, we'll hit 50 next year, which will open up some different options to us. But even then, because of needs like my own, I know that they will begin to consider some of our historical needs, and that will be a challenge for us. I would love to offer healthcare for my employees and their families. There is no way I can do that. Even the marketplace, Joe can probably speak to this much more than I can. For my family, when we considered the marketplace was easily $14,000 a year for my family. You know, I'm paying just under $17,000 a year right now out of pocket for my husband and 2 children. So I think that that's that's like $17,000 a year. I told you yesterday that 89% of our participants make $15,000 a year. Like, there's just this huge discrepancy on what's possible for people. And so I don't know, Laura, who the lead would be for that. I think if you put it out there and said, would there be a couple, because I might be a minority in that, right? I don't know. St. Joe's, who has 500 employees, might have a better economy of scale, but me at 50, I don't have that. And so I'd love to connect with others who, and I don't know what's legal. There's all this legal stuff that goes with that, but
Sure.
what we could pull together would be ideal.
Thank you.
Good?
I think, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lori. I popped over there when we had a cancellation and said, hey, any chance you could speak again? So I appreciate her willingness to come up onto the stage and be recorded and answer your questions on the fly. So thank you, Lori, for your willingness to help us out there and answer some great questions. So next up, we have Rick Cephas from is it the Northeastern Pennsylvania or Lackawanna County chapter of the NAACP. So thanks, Rick, for being with us.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rick Cephas. I am the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee Chairperson for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP of Lackawanna County branch. First, I want to say thank you to Scranton Area Foundation for hosting this listening session. And part of a listening session is hoping that we are listening to what's being said up here. I'm thinking over the last couple of nights of how I wanted to approach everyone in this room. And I believe that I need to tell the truth. And we want to talk about barriers. You want to talk about making Scranton better. There's barriers across the board. Okay? We'll take barriers to unemployment. I looked at the plan last night, and it speaks on childcare, transportation, and training. What about criminal records? Okay? You have people who have minor felonies who can't get jobs. And if they can't get jobs, they can't pay their fines, they can't pay their court costs. So what ends up happening? One or two things. Either that person's going to go back to the life of crime, which is how they ended up in the first place, or they not pay their fines and end up right back where they were in the first place. It's not even a catch-22. It's a damned if you do, a damned if I don't. So we need to be able to look at and get more employers willing to overlook certain, parts of that person's record, because a lot of them are hireable people. So the other thing is, and just so you know, what jobs are available to most felons that come out: barbers, let me see, landscapers, dog trainers, general labor, and cooks. And all of those jobs are $10 or less an hour. And what kind of living is that? That barely pays rent and maybe 3 days worth of food. And they're having to sacrifice something just to keep the bills paid. So they might have to sacrifice rent or half of the rent this month just so they don't go back to jail next month. So we have to be mindful of that. You want to break down a barrier, break that one down. Okay? To training, yes, you can get the training while they're still in, while they're waiting to get out. You want to talk about another barrier. Let's talk about the barrier, housing. Okay, in 2020, the average rent in Scranton was $795. Today, what is it, $1,100? And you got so many people now that won't take Section 8, or you have to make 3 times the amount of the rent. Who has $3,300 up front to give someone when they're only at a job making $10.95 an hour with a family of 3. And that's being modest. And you have so many, you had, in post-pandemic, you had all the evictions, and there was supposed to be all this money coming through. All I heard was complaints about, I'm trying to get this help, and I get nothing back. I have applied for this, and I got nothing back. And again, you know, you have people out there that are looking for the help that was supposed to be there, and what do we end up with? The streets, or living with relatives, or living in a car. Just a little bit about my background, I was homeless at one point. Down in Atlanta, living in my car, I did it for almost a year. But luckily, being a veteran, there were some options available to me. And I took advantage of those opportunities. And here I am now. You know, I am not a distinguished professional, but I'm living my best life right now. I'm actually a school district employee. My first half a day. You know, I'm slated to be the next president of the NAACP Lackawanna County branch as of January. And if you was to, who else is getting those same opportunities that I get? Not many. So how come they can't get the same opportunities that I had? Even though I'm a vet, I'm no better than the rest of you. The only difference between me and the rest of you was a signature on a piece of paper. Because everyone in here are dedicated Americans who love this country very much, who love this city very much and want to see it prosper, just as I do. We want to talk about the disparity when it comes to housing. Well, we already talked about that. Medical. And this is just happening. How is it that I can go to Geisinger and get care and I get A+ care. A+ care. But the next person comes in and they don't diagnose them right. They don't give them the right medication. They're being discharged without, being properly told what they should be doing once they're discharged. Something simple as verifying what pharmacy you get your medications from. They do that for me. They don't do it for the next person. We have to make sure that all of us are trying to make sure we hit all the areas where no one's getting treated equally. We talk about the equity. First, the diversiveness, we're here. We're not going nowhere. So the diversity is here. Equity. There's a difference between equity and equality. Okay? Equality means I have the ability to have the exact same thing as you. Equity, that means I have the same thing as you. And we don't have the same things. And we need to make sure that changes. The inclusiveness, I heard about this earlier this year, but I was really not into, the talks. So my question was, who else is involved in this if it's about inclusion? I mean, and I'm going to be honest with you, where's the rest of me at? Where's the other minorities at that are supposed to be part of the inclusion? I don't see it represented here. And if they were asked, I'm going to tell you the reason why they were asked, weren't showing up. Why? We don't trust you. You talk about you want to give us this, and you talk about want to give us that, and you sit here and we're sitting there waiting for it, and what do we get? Nothing. Oh, we're going to give you this, and we're going to give you that. We sit around and wait for it. What do you give us? Nothing. So where's the trust? That whole DEI piece is built on trust. Be about your word. Say what you're going to do and do it. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
One of the things that I had asked in the forum yesterday was about workforce. And, one of the initiatives, particularly through the Scranton Area Community Foundation, and I know other partners, is going to be focused growing more on the workforce issue and how we can look at challenges within that. And so one of the key areas as we start to shape some of this is, I think, probably needs to be focused on those formerly incarcerated and how we can maybe establish models that are established effectively in other areas to be more intentional with companies, with those hiring in the area in that regard. I don't know if we know the best default models to do that, but I definitely think it's something we want to welcome the conversation to understand how to go about it. So if there's any insight or thoughts about, where you've seen it work effectively, I do think it's something we would like to pull together a group to look into further.
Right. And once again, it boils down to the trust. And the trust starts at the door. So when, they're exiting the jail, exiting prison, they want to know where they're going. And if we start right there to say, this is where you can go, this is what we're going to give you, and you make sure you stay in contact. You don't tell them one time and then expect them to do it on his own, because remember, we don't trust you. So you keep that contact. Says, you know what, it's still here. We're still waiting on you. We still want you to come in. If you tell me sincerely and you keep asking me to come, I'm gonna show up. And I'm gonna and if it's really a wholesome meal that you're offering, I'm gonna partake. No other questions?
Said a lot of good things, a lot of important things about housing, a lot of the issues we need to work on, we need to tackle. I know at the Scranton Area Community Foundation, we try to approach a lot of our community initiatives with equity at their core. And I think we can certainly do a better job doing that, but we would welcome continued conversation and engagement and opportunities to build that trust.
All right, and if we don't show up, please ask again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Rick, I'll make sure to ask again. I'm the Community Initiatives Manager at the Foundation, and we have hosted a couple roundtables around DEI, and we could have done and we can do a better reach. So don't be surprised if you see my email name 6 times, because I think it's very important. And all the points that you spoke to were very valid and current, and I'm hoping that we could, move into action and develop a more trusting and genuine relationship. So thank you for coming today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Rick for being here and for your candor. I'd like to welcome up next Pam Anslinger from NeighborWorks NEPA.
Hello. It's nice to see a few familiar faces and a few new ones. It's my first time doing something like this, so I will be totally honest. Hopefully I won't stumble over any of my words. My name is Pamela. I'm with NeighborWorks Northeastern Pennsylvania, and I manage our homeownership center. So I'm going to focus a lot today on homeownership and how to break down some of the barriers to being able to access that. I also just want to say yes to a lot of the things I've heard so far. It definitely resonated in many ways. Myself have struggled with homelessness, as well as being a parent with 2 children in the Scranton School District, and going through teenage years during the pandemic and the mental health strain that can absolutely have. So I really appreciate hearing from all the people so far today. At NeighborWorks during in the Homeownership Center program, we offer 3 primary programs. We focus on an initiative that we just started called Pathways to Homeownership. That program is focusing on creating opportunity to access mortgages. So a lot of reasons why people can't get into homes are because of credit scores, low income, low resources for down payment and closing cost assistance. So we focus a lot on how to create education in that area and support to be able to resolve those barriers. Additionally, we work with homebuyers who are mortgage ready to access down payment assistance funds. We do administer the City of Scranton Down Payment Assistance Program, which has been very successful over the last couple of years. For home retention services, we focus on financial management as a homeowner. So how to plan for home maintenance and repair issues, financial instability. As we know, the pandemic was not something anyone was prepared for. And as a result, we've seen a huge increase in foreclosure cases, which is our last service area. We offer court support as well as navigation through that process. So with that, we offer advocacy services that help to understand that process. That process is a very legal process, and not everyone who's experiencing risk of foreclosure can afford an attorney. So we are free advocacy services that help navigate that process. Sorry. So far within the City of Scranton, with some of the programs that we've helped administer, we have administered $150,000 of direct mortgage assistance to Scranton residents and homeowners during the COVID-19 pandemic. We've also helped administer $150,000 in down payment assistance since 2020. That has assisted 45 new homeowners in the City of Scranton. In addition to that 45, in total, we've assisted 70 people purchase homes in the City of Scranton. The difference there is there are obviously people that don't always qualify for the program. And of that additional 35 people, 14 of them access the Lackawanna County Down Payment Assistance Program because that county program allows higher income. So there certainly is still a need for those funds and more accessibility for all people to be able to access them. This year, we also have, just this year alone, we have assisted 70 Scranton residents apply for the statewide Homeowner Assistance Fund application. And to date, 19 people have received assistance totaling $201,000. So we're looking forward to hopefully more residents being able to access that program. That program does not just assist with mortgage payments, it also assists with tax balances as well as homeowners insurance and utilities. So that's where that program has really had a huge impact as people recover from COVID. With the City of Scranton Homebuyer Program, through those funds, we're able to reduce someone's monthly mortgage payment on average between 3 and 5%. So when we think about affordable home ownership, we know that the federal government says that that shouldn't be more than 30% of our income. But when we're looking at low income, we know that a lot of times people end up getting qualified for mortgages that are higher than 30%. The down payment assistance program allows for larger down payments. When you have a larger down payment, that also not only reduces the loan amount that you're taking, but it also reduces the additional costs associated with that loan. So when you don't have as high of a down payment and you're maxing out maybe on a 3%, you're gonna see higher closing costs as well as insurance costs because you're considered a higher risk. So having a more meaningful and larger down payment has a ripple effect throughout the entire home ownership affordability. In addition, on our foreclosure clients, 32% of Scranton residents are age 65 and older. So when we use the word foreclosure, a lot of times that's thought of just as the mortgage. But really, foreclosure just means you're at risk for housing instability. So that can be taxes, as well as deferred maintenance and some other issues. So noting that 32% of our clients are over age 65, in most cases, we're looking at home equity mortgage, reverse mortgage concerns, as well as tax delinquency. Okay. When we look at affordable housing homeownership, we also have to keep in mind that income is heavily driving this, as well as family demographics. So we all know that when we look at income, most often our marginalized communities are unable to access homeownership because they disproportionately have lower incomes as well as lower credit scores. So when we look at ways to resolve that and try to target and work through those issues, we have to be cognizant of the fact that they don't have the same access to some of the resources that others have as well. When we look at income grouping, most of our foreclosure clients do fall below 50% area median income. However, they do also have a situation where that's temporary. It's a financial hardship or usually a medical diagnosis that has caused the foreclosure. Most of our financial education clients do run between the 30 to 80% area median income. So you're looking at people who really truly could access affordable home ownership if they can overcome the barriers that are preventing them from being able to access quality and affordable mortgages. One thing to also note this year is the change in market. The city can't necessarily control that, but what we have seen is a staggering difference. We have over where we used to run on par with our financial education and our homeownership clients, we would obviously see more financial clients, and then we usually would see between a 10-point difference or 10-person difference of successful homeownership promotion, so people who were able to purchase a home. This year, that had a drastic shift. We have over 60 financial education clients, but only a 20-person rate of actually purchasing now. And that is heavily driven by the increase in purchase prices. On average, it was about 103 was the median purchase price prior to this year, and now it's about 130. So almost a 30% increase in purchase prices. Coupled that with the interest rates, and most people cannot afford to purchase even with assistance programs. So some recommendations that we've put together is a financial coaching program that also leverages funds to be able to create forgivable loan programs. So that way we can target credit resolution. So that could be resolving collection accounts, reducing debts. People with low credit scores are heavily targeted for high-cost predatory practices. So if we offer a revolving loan fund that also has a grant or a forgivable portion to it, once you've paid down so much of it, that can have a huge impact on being able to break that barrier. For homebuyer program, also reevaluating funding sources to create an access for higher incomes to be able to access that fund. For homeowners that are elder, looking at either additional waiver programs or cost reduction programs within the city's tax base for those populations in particular. We do know that there is a statewide rebate program, but maybe there's something that the city can also implement to add to that. Lastly, for foreclosure, and then I will be done, is just increased awareness around that program and preventative measures. One conversation we've been having lately is talking with municipalities and creating welcome packets, talking about resources in our community, letting people know about your local small businesses. We see the new homeowners. We see the first-time buyers. So how can we better engage them and make sure that they have what they need to be successful, especially when they're coming from out of the area? And then the last part with foreclosure is also to consider small home repair loan programs. The state does have a program that is a 1% interest rate. However, no one's able to qualify for it. And I've talked to the state about this, so I'm not afraid to say that. They unfortunately have a calculation that just makes it really, really difficult to use. I won't go into it. But a lot of times people are denied. Credit scores are not taken into consideration. And again, it's a 1% interest rate, but it's for home repairs. We know that there's a deferred maintenance issue. We know that also deferred maintenance makes housing unsafe, specifically for our elder community. So having access, again, to an option that is affordable, but also, creates accountability in the work that's being done by the owner and some type of repayment can also build and make sure that people are able to stay in their home safely and also have an affordable option for new homeowners. Any questions? Sorry.
Thank you. I think one of the themes that has resonated yesterday and today, one of the most common problems is accessible, quality, dignified housing. And I know your organization does incredible work with that, and we're all looking at ways that we could further attack that challenge. One of the things that came up about prior to the pandemic, when we had co-hosted a housing summit with the Fed and NeighborWorks, et cetera, was about how women and people of color really have a lack of access in being able to get a lot of these dollars to do that maintenance, that type of work that's critical. And I'm wondering what, if anything, as a community, as community leaders, can we do to try to help build that? You mentioned your last point about the availability of dollars for that. So I'm just wondering, is there a place for us all at that table to work with the lending institutions?
Absolutely. I think some of it can come towards lending. Some of it can also come from government-sponsored programs. Lenders have to have, their own interest rates, qualifications. When you have programs that are sponsored through the government, you can create underwriting guidelines that specifically target certain demographics, where for lending institutions that can be restrictive because they, could then end up with the other side of that of, oh, you're restricting access to a financial product because I'm not a specific demographic. When a government-sponsored program is targeting demographics based on income and being able to increase accessibility, that alleviates some of that restriction that you can sometimes have. I think to that point, though, is partnering with the lending institutions is critical, because if you're looking at these loan programs being reportable to the credit reports to build credit and payment history, you need to leverage those partnerships to be able to have that access.
So I'm hoping you can touch on about the program you said that no one qualifies for, on what the barriers are. As Laura said, we have a partnership with the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, who Sam is right here. So is it advocacy? Is it changing the restrictions or whatnot? And then my other comment, and then I'll sit down, is rent to own, right? How do you feel as those who are first-time homeowners who may have rented for 20 years? How can that help by reporting it to the credit bureau? They've almost paid off a mortgage at that point. How can that support a first-time homeowner, or if it could?
So first question, the program that the state runs, the reason why that's not very accessible is because they don't do standard appraisals. So loan to value, if the home is worth $100,000, you can't overextend the home's value more than 110%, meaning you can't have liens on the property equaling more than 110% of a $100,000 home. So when you're a new homeowner and you need to go in and do repairs, possibly cost saving, such as updating the windows, things like that, to reduce electric and heating costs, you don't qualify for the program because they don't accept your appraisal. What they do is some weird website that I do have on my computer that says that through the millage and base rate and all this other mathematical equation, the home is truly actually only worth $80,000. So now you're not able to get approved for the program because they're saying that your home's worth less than what you paid for it. We've talked to that. Unfortunately, it's in litigation and it's kind of set in stone. So they are looking at ways to try to change that, but it's not going to be something that's done quickly. To the other question regarding rent to owns, my advice anytime someone is thinking about renting to owning is have a real estate attorney review the contract. Contracts are typically written in favor of the owner. This was not a Scranton resident, but I will share a quick story. I did have a client that came in a few months ago. She gave $15,000 to a gentleman to buy his home. That $15,000 was a lot of tax return money, some COVID response funds. She was a single mom and she was currently out of work at the time of the transaction. A notary signed the deed over, notarized the deed into her name, and then a few months later, after the gentleman who sold her the home was exiting his COVID forbearance, which is permission to miss payments, she was then notified that there was a delinquent mortgage on the property. Though it is technically illegal on the lending side for the gentleman to have transferred the deed, her not having the resources to hire an attorney did leave her in a position where she essentially lost $15,000 and the home that she was purchasing. So rent-to-own contracts are not my favorite. My position usually on those are, we're here to help you learn how to qualify for a quality mortgage and affordable mortgage so you can have safe and stable housing. If somebody is considering a rent-to-own, then an attorney reviewing that process is really critical. There are some alternative credit processes, such as counting rent payments towards your credit. The concern and the issue is for lenders to typically do that process, you have to have a 0 credit score. You have to have nothing on it in order for them to create a credit score based off of these alternative payments. There are some changes coming to that, but unfortunately a lot of those changes don't always tie to mortgage regulations. Sometimes those things are more acceptable with lower lending, so personal loans or things like that. But when you get into mortgages that are very high transactions, they don't always like to see alternative credit lines like that. Other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam. We definitely could not tell that that was your first time presenting. Great job. Right now, we're going to actually take a quick break. Just give everybody the opportunity to refill their coffee, grab some water, grab some breakfast, use the restroom. So it's 10:17 right now. We're going to reconvene at 10:30. So 10:30 we'll be back. Thank you.